Hey up, welcome to Satellites 56, my name's Charles, welcome back to the video. Let's get into Mark chapter 5 in 2 minutes. Go. Chapter 5 begins with Jesus and his disciples landing their boat on the other side of the lake, where they are greeted by a man with evil spirits living in him. He is an outcast, constantly breaking himself free from the chains that he is put in by the villagers, and spends all day and night screaming. When he sees Jesus, he falls on his knees and screams,
"What do you want from me?"
Jesus asks him what his name is, and the man replies,
"Legion, for there are so many of us."
The spirits then beg Jesus not to destroy them, but to send them into the pigs in the nearby field. Jesus allows them to do so, and at once they run off the edge of the cliff into the water and drown. What a waste of bacon! The onlookers are terrified at what Jesus has done and to see the man sackclothed and so at peace. The healed man begs to go with Jesus, but Jesus tells him to go back home to his family and tell them what the Lord has done for him. The man does one better and goes round telling anyone he can about the miracle. Jesus and his disciples go back across the lake and are greeted by a large crowd, as well as a man named Jairus. He explains that his 12-year-old daughter is very ill and asks Jesus to come with him so he can heal her. Jesus agrees. However, as Jesus makes his way through the crowd, a woman who has been bleeding for 12 years secretly shuffles her way to Jesus and touches his cloak, hoping that would be enough to heal her. And it is. But Jesus feels the power go from him and asks who touched him. The woman reveals herself, and Jesus tells her that her faith has made her well. Unfortunately, just as Jesus heals the woman, some messengers from Jairus' household come with some bad news. Jairus' daughter has died. They tell him not to bother anymore with Jesus and to come back home, but Jesus turns to Jairus and says, "Don't be afraid, only believe." Jesus, Jairus, Peter, John and James go to Jairus' house where everyone is very upset, but Jesus asks them why they're crying as the daughter is only asleep. The professional mourners begin to laugh, so Jesus kicks them out of the room, leaving just him, the daughter, the mother, the father and his 3 disciples. Jesus takes the girl's hand and says, "Little girl, I tell you to get up." At once she gets up and begins walking around. Everyone is amazed, but Jesus gives them strict orders not to tell anyone what's happened and to give her something to eat. Normally at this point I talk about the 5 points or 3 points that we're going to take away, but there's just really one point that I want to mention this week, and that is Jesus cares about relationships. In all 3 of these stories, relationships are at the core of how Jesus operates. Firstly, Jesus asks the man what his name is, and he's annoyed when the spirits reply instead. Jesus wants to know the person, not the spirits. Secondly, Jesus wants to know who's touched his cloak and has been healed, because he can feel it go from him. His disciples tell him that there's no point because there's so many people around him, but he is insistent on finding out who it is who touched him. And of course the woman is brave enough to reveal herself, and Jesus looks at her and says, "My daughter, your faith has made you well." Jesus shows her kindness. He's not annoyed that she touched a cloak and got healed, but instead he wants to know so that he can celebrate with her. In both of those stories, the man with the evil spirits and the woman with the bleeding, Jesus restores them into relationship with the community and with their friends and family. As Noah et al. Said a few weeks ago, if you were deemed to have evil spirits living in you, or if you were bleeding, you were often seen as ritually unclean. You weren't allowed to meet in the temples, you have to separate yourself from society because you were effectively unclean and therefore didn't want to contaminate other people. But Jesus doesn't really care about that. Jesus goes, "Okay, I see you, I want to know you, I'm going to heal you, and then I'm going to restore you back so that you can go back into the temple, so that you can go and see your family." He says that to the man, doesn't he, to him? He says, "Don't come with me, go back to your family, go and restore those relationships that have been broken." Jesus is all about fixing broken relationships. And finally, we see Jesus caring about relationships in the very final story, which is that healing of the 12-year-old girl. And he says to the mourners that she is only asleep, that she's not dead, and I don't think that's really what was the case. I think Jesus didn't want other people to be talking about this girl who's been raised from the dead. Can you imagine being in the same class as someone who's been raised from the dead and how you'd whisper about maybe they're a zombie or something like that? Jesus saves her from a lifetime of being that girl. But also, as soon as he brings her back from the dead and she's walking around, instead of letting everybody get really excited about what's going on, he says, get her something to eat. Jesus cares about her. She's been dead. She needs something to eat. She needs something to sustain her. More than the miracle, he cares about her well-being. He cares about that relationship. So Jesus is all about relationship. That is the thing that we can take away from Mark chapter 5. Join me next week when we'll be looking at Mark chapter 6. Until then, keep yourself safe. I'll be thinking of you and praying for you. Goodbye.